Welcome to the American Theatre Wing seminars on working in the theatre. These Working in the Theatre seminars bring you a unique behind-the-scenes look from the perspective of performers, producers, playwrights, directors, designers, and agents. The seminars are coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. The American Theatre Wing, as many of you know, is founder of the theatre's highest honor, the Tony Award. This is an honor that is bestowed not just for the longest run or for the best reviews, but for the achievement of excellence in the theater, for recognizing that excellence in the craft of theater. Antoinette Perry was a wonderful woman. She was a producer, she was a director, and she was a playwright. And it is in her honor that this award has been founded. We're a year-round organization, the American Theatre Wing, and year-round our programs go out to the community. We have a hospital program which brings live theater to hospitals, nursing homes, and aid centers. We have a program for children in their schools, Saturday Theater for Children, and so at a youngest age they know what theater is all about on Saturday mornings. And our program, Introduction to Broadway, is indeed a wonderful program. Thousands of children have come to see their first big Broadway show. They have never been on Broadway, and they have never seen a Broadway show. We're able to do this through the cooperation of the Board of Education, the generosity of the theater producers, and the children's desire to see a Broadway show. They pay a very small amount of money, but it is an amount of money, so that they make that commitment to see a show. We think that's a very important part of the program. And so far, we have over 36 or 37,000 children that have come in just 3 seasons to see their shows. They meet with the cast afterwards, and they ask questions about how it is and what they can do and who turns on the lights and all the nitty-gritty things that make up a Broadway show. But it inspires them to know more about the theater, and we hope that they are then going to be the audience of the future. These seminars, which are an outgrowth of the Wings School, focus on the playwright, the performer, the director, the agent, the guilds, and the unions. And every one of the seminars that the Wing has been bringing to you shows you another part of the working in the theater progress. Today's seminar is on the production. It's on a marvelous production called Beauty and the Beast, which is now playing at the Palace Theater. And the producers are here, and the staff of the production are here, in order to explain how this show was brought to you to Broadway. It's a wonderful, wonderful show, and it's a part of our history of theater. And so before we go any further, I'm going to have Brendan Gill, who is a author, a director, and a legendary figure in the New Yorker magazine, and a member of the Board of Directors of the American Theatre Wing, George White, who is a director and president of the O'Neill Center in Waterford, Connecticut. They will co-moderate, and from them will come how everyone can be a producer of a successful Broadway show. I hope.
Not to speak for George, but to speak for myself, I regard myself as an ideal moderator of this program because I know absolutely nothing about the business side of producing the theater. I intend to learn a great deal, as Isabel has promised us. To identify the names, if not the weights of all the players, on the farthest right is Chris Boneau, who was press representative for the Beauty and the Beast, and who apparently in his teens founded the firm of Boneau, Bryan, Brown in 1991. Those 3 B's are the occasion for the famous saying, busy as bees. Among Chris's current clients are Angels in America, Beauty and the Beast, and The Who's Tommy. Next to Chris is Jeremiah Harris, the production supervisor of Beauty and the Beast, who has many Broadway credits to his name, including the Starlight Express Tour and M. Butterfly. And to my immediate right is Robert McTyre, currently Vice President of Disney Attractions Productions, and before joining Disney in 1982, he was with the Nederlander organization here in New York. George?
Thank you, Brendan. Since we're talking about players, I'll start by getting the puck on the ice with going over to Margery Singer, who is currently promoting Disney's Beauty and the Beast, who is the former marketing director of Madison Square Garden, where the illusion comes from, as well as the director of public relations at the 1980 Winter Olympics. And on her immediate right is Michael David, who along with Edward Strong and Sherman Warner is part of the Dodgers Productions, currently producing Beauty and the Beast, as well as Guys and Dolls and The Who's Tommy, all of which are on Broadway. And to my immediate left is Donald Frantz, who is the associate producer of Beauty and the Beast, and for 4 years a veteran of Walt Disney World, after serving on the faculty of UCLA. I want to get into that a little bit later, too. So, Brendan, back to you.
Everything we hear about a musical, and especially an exceptionally spectacular musical, is that it takes so long to get it into being, to bring it to the point of actually arriving on Broadway. So I think the most interesting question to ask right off the bat from you, Robert, is how long ago did the notion that this was going to be made come into existence in the Disney organization?
Well, I think you could go all the way back to when the film was being made by the Disney team and by Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg, and I'm sure that it was discussed at that point. But most recently, in 1992, is when we started working on the project heavily, when they turned us on, so we've been working on it straight through all that time.
But they were thinking already when they were making the movie that it could be done.
The notion came up in the sense that Howard Ashman and Alan Menken, of course, came from the theater, and what they did with our animation group was so theatrical in its treatment and its development that it was quite obvious to people, even before the film was released, that there was a lot of potential here. But the actual decision didn't come until 1992.
But still, is it a unique event to have done this from film to musical?
Well,
or have there been other? I can't think.
There have been many productions that have done that. Certainly, it's unique for our company, for the Walt Disney Company, to do it. I can't think of any animation film that was changed into a live production.
Picking up on that a moment, because I can understand why you might have trouble doing The Little Mermaid. Unless you had the old Hippodrome with the underwater
we've
stuff.
talked about it.
All right, and also, what about Aladdin? I mean, is that going the same way? That has, I mean, it's the same sort of creative team, I believe, or many of the same players were in Aladdin.
Yes, Alan Menken and Howard Ashman did the music and lyrics for that, and then Tim Rice, of course, who came into Beauty and the Beast, also did some supplemental lyrics for Aladdin. We've talked about what we might do next with Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg. We've talked about Aladdin, we've talked about Little Mermaid, we've talked about Mary Poppins. We haven't decided yet what we're going to do, but obviously Little Mermaid is difficult because of the water sequences. Aladdin is difficult because of all the illusions and because of Robin Williams did such a magnificent job in the film. We haven't decided yet.
But in terms of commerce nowadays, to be worldwide is the great source of revenue, is it not? To have things on film, things that can go all over the world all the time. So this represents a step backward into the legitimate theater, where how would you calculate the amount of revenue? You hope then that this will run like Cats or something for 8, 10, 15 years?
Well, that would be the dream.
Yeah, but that must be part of the projection in the budget. Otherwise, how do you do it?
Well, from a business standpoint, obviously we hope that we will recoup our investment from our New York production. And so our projections are made on that. But of course, what you hope with any of these business situations is that you have spin-off productions, that you can take it out on the road, that you can take it to London, that you can take it to Japan, and it remains to be seen. But in terms of the actual decision to do Beauty and the Beast here on Broadway, that decision was made discreetly for Broadway, for the theater here.
Has there been an announced figure about the budget of this, what this show cost as compared to...
I was going to ask if Don knew that, as the producer. Maybe he would.
Okay.
Who wants to own up?
Well, the budget's established at 11.9 million.
Right, I just thought
That's what we need. But that doesn't sound very extravagant considering how elaborate the production is.
What is the budget?
11.9 million. And I guess, Jerry, you have history with some of the Andrew Lloyd Webber or really useful productions, Cam Macintosh productions.
How does that break down, the 11.9, in a sense, in big blocks, sets, actors? Would you illuminate that for us?
Well, in broad
use
terms,
something out of the show.
the physical production is roughly 60% of that budget, in broad terms. Off the top of my head, I don't have the figures.
No, but all right. So, but $6.5 million for sets, roughly. So
No,
Sets,
for the
costumes, like-
sets, costumes, lighting, illusions, trucking, labor, all the things that go into making the physical production happen.
Well, didn't, for example, Crazy for You, didn't that cost $6 or $7 million to bring to Broadway?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
So 11 doesn't sound out of line at all to me. I'm amazed that you were able to do that well. I congratulate you as a non-businessman on your business acumen. So then,
Well, this show is contemporary with the other large musicals. I mean, it parallels the production cost of what it takes to put a show like this together.
and then with an ordinary musical like Crazy for You, I think it took, what, a year or so to recoup their investment. I think they're just about reaching that point. And that was a one-man adventure on the part of Roger Horshaw. He just did it with his own money, with his own purse. But he happened to have a very big purse. So I don't know how many companies, how many people are on the road with that, whether there are 3 or 4. Do you have any idea about that, Chris?
No, actually, I don't. Mike, do you know how many companies? Have
one
company up?
There's one company on the road. There's a company in Toronto and Japan.
London.
Japan and London.
Now, what will happen to the Showboat? Is that also going to be, isn't that also a very
You were the
expensive-
major investor in Showboat.
Well, I am, but
Bringing
keep
it
it
down.
quiet. Don't let anybody out there
Really-
know. Surely that's up there, too, as a very expensive.
So we understand.
Yeah.
Well, you could also make because you're a producer of 3 hits on Broadway now with Beauty and the Beast. How does
So I
that
have to
compare?
establish, George, very clearly that I really work for Disney in this regard. The Dodgers, as much as they would like to be the producers of Beauty and the Beast, are basically general managers of Beauty and the Beast. So we're
What is a general manager? Let's get right down to that now.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain the general manager for
What is your role
viewers?
here, Michael, on this, as general manager?
I suppose that we're responsible once they have the idea and put the team together, or at least the principal members of the team, and determined to do this. We're one of the few people brought in subsequently to work with them to manage and coordinate the actual doing of their idea. And in this case, it was an idea that found its way from the Disneys to Houston and then to New York. And so
What are the
basically, like
things that
Jerry
you
and like
bring
Chris,
in?
basically we were involved to basically help them get the idea off the page, or in this case off the screen.
What
and
do
onto
you
the stage.
coordinate? What do you bring in?
It's everything from whatever you can write down, and Disney certainly writes a lot of things down. So it's everything from coordinating all the paper that moves around, with everything from numbers to words on it, to a fairly sizable staff of people from the creative teams to
You
the
work
folks
with the
who sell
union?
tickets to ushers, to designers, to whatever. And I mean, Jerry has his own territory where he sort of deals with people behind the curtain line, and I suppose Chris and our office deals with what happens in front of the curtain line, again, on behalf of Disney.
Who, for instance, hires Margery and Chris?
Disney.
Disney does, not the general manager does not. in this
It
case,
could
I
have
recommend.
been done either way. Maybe I should jump in a little bit and explain that the Walt Disney Company has a great deal of experience in many fields, but we are not the experts in legitimate theater, even though some of us have, spent a fair amount of time in the theater. We thought it was very important to go out and hire experts to supplement our team, to supplement our team with people who know Broadway, who know the theater, who are the best in their fields, and that's how some of these people came to work with us, because we needed their advice, and they've been incredibly helpful. So somebody like Michael has helped us in almost every area of the production. Because Michael, as you mentioned earlier, is not just a general manager for us, but it's a producer of quite a few shows, and so his experience has been invaluable. And they've helped us in every aspect of the production.
So they made the Dodgers made the recommendation to you, or
in many things. In fact, Margery, for example, came to us through Michael's office. He recommended her. He recommended Chris, Jerry Harris. So we found on our own, fortunately. And
when did Margery come on? At what point?
About 6 months prior to the production coming to Broadway.
And is that the usual arrangement about that? You're not necessary before that, roughly that period, because everybody has to get dovetailed in at various stages.
Let me say on Margery's behalf that I think she's necessary way before 6 months. The fact is, and that has nothing to do with Disney and when they hired her. I think what Disney did with Margery is something that a lot of shows don't do at all. We try and do, and I know some others do, but time is indeed your money in this business, and so the sooner one's on, the
And Chris, when do you come into the picture? Also right at the very beginning?
I've been on this for about a year now, involved. We had an interesting situation. We went down to Houston to work on the show for 7 weeks of previews in Houston around Christmas time, which was an invaluable lesson experience for all of us for a lot of reasons. The show changed a lot during that period, but also the work that Marge and I and the marketing team from Disney, we had a great time to sort of get our stuff in place. The press things that I needed to do, how we were going to sell the show, how we were going to present the show, the way it was going to look. We made decisions about which photographs we wanted to use. There was a time when we were talking very early on that we were never going to show people pictures of the Beast, which we sort of figured out later on is you can't have a title, Beauty and the Beast, and not show him what he looks like. So that went away very quickly. And then we thought, we're not going to show anybody what the objects look like. Well, when we saw how great they were and how well they photographed and how much people wanted to see them, we changed our minds again. And these kinds of mistakes and changes and rethinking of things and sharpening of our skills, we got to do in Houston. We got to sort of try out without everybody sort of watching us. We didn't have critics fly into Houston, as some people do. The Showboat production flew critics to Toronto to review it ahead of time. We deliberately made that decision not to do that. And we got to do our work without a lot of people standing over and looking over our shoulders, which is really important.
Well, picking up on that, too, I happen to be a great fan, and I know, I'm sorry that our cameras can't pick it up, of the logo, of which Bob is wearing the watch of the logo, but I'm sorry you can't see it. But it's a great logo. I love that logo. How did you find that? Who did it? Was it you, Chris? Was it Margery? Who did it? Where did you... Tell us a little bit about the process of coming up with that, because it's very, very special.
It's great. It's the work of the terrific artists at Disney who actually put it together.
It was a Disney artist,
yes, and it was a very early Saturday morning meeting where we all looked at some things. We had something in Houston that was very close to the movie, and I think that's really important for us to talk about for a second. Is that what we didn't want to do was say this is the movie on stage. It's very different. There are obviously parts of the movie there, and it takes its basis from the movie, but we went beyond that, and we didn't want people to think that, there's a movie playing at the Palace, and we're asking them to pay legitimate theater ticket prices. So we wanted something different. And on a Saturday morning, we saw some artwork, and it was actually 2 pieces of art that we sort of asked them to put together.
What were they?
It was the silhouette, which was there. Michael was there, Margery was there, you were there, and then some of the marketing people, and Bob and Don, and Jeffrey Katzenberg was there. And it was the silhouette of the Beast, and then the rose was a separate element, I think, with the petal falling. And we said, why not put them together? And they liked the idea, and they came back and what they presented. And it's terrific.
It was pivotal in getting across to the audience the perception and the expectation of the show. It was pivotal. And Houston was the tryout for the show, and it was also kind of the tryout for the marketing. And when in Houston, the logo that was close to the film ran in the papers, we saw the expectation was really more the movie and not the show. And by that time, the show had taken on its own life. The logo helped reflect that life, and it's a more masculine image. It's a more theatrical, dramatic image.
I would think, and Margery, is it your job particularly to clarify, it seems simplistic, I know, but to clarify for the public, and I'm talking about both nationwide and worldwide, that it's like Superman the movie. This is not Beauty and the Beast the movie. I mean, is that one of your jobs, or is it Chris, or is it both? I mean, to really focus on the fact that this is a legitimate, that what they're going to do is they're going to see something that is live.
It's really all of our jobs, through the advertising that we do, through the promotional campaigns, through all of the public relations activities. It's our job to communicate what the show is on Broadway. Well, starting with...
Well, we started with what it isn't. I mean,
part of what... How do we separate this? Public relations,
yeah, I handle
publicity.
Publicity and public relations.
Right.
Basically, everything that you...
Advertising is not represented here, but that's who does your advertising?
It's done. We have an in-house
yeah.
people doing, but we all contribute. I mean, you can't do advertising. You can't do any of these things without us all talking to each other.
And then marketing goes to you.
Yes, and promotion.
And then you...
and we all work together.
Now, in preparing for the arrival in New York City, to what extent was an accident of history, which is the Disney moving into 42nd Street, did that muddy the waters? Did that get people confused? It got me a little confused. I wasn't sure what was happening, what Disney was going to be doing on 42nd Street. Or didn't that affect you at all?
It affected us, certainly it did. I mean, but it was, I think, it affected us in a good way.
Yes, it's in a great affirmative thing.
It was saying we're not only coming to do one show, but we're coming in to be part of this community, and we're going to be part of the real estate. We're going to be part of the community in a very real way, and it was actually very helpful.
Let me go back one step. We missed casting. Where did the casting take place?
Here in New York.
In New York. So who came through? Who did the casting?
Who was the casting director? Jade Binder, who did a fabulous job. Who worked with our director. And
Michael, were you involved in that?
Not in the day-to-day casting. An awful lot of people came in for callbacks, but
it's interesting that I think Miss Egan or a couple of them are out of Disney's camp, though, weren't they, or had some experience either in one or another of the...
Yeah, Susan has done some television things for Disney. Yeah, several people have done things for our studio.
She lives in Orange County.
Yeah, she came from Long Beach, actually, yeah. But that really was coincidental. We really found these actors in New York. We did get some people from Canada, but we found the actors in New York, and we're very lucky to have such talented people.
It's interesting, on many of our seminars we hear that theater performers are working in the theater, or theater producers or theater directors working in the theater, and then they go to television or movies to make some money. And here we have television and movies, in a sense, coming to New York. Are you coming here to make money? Do you intend...
Well, we hope so.
I hope you do, too. But what was the main reason for coming to Broadway?
Well, the company just felt it was time. The idea of doing theater has been one that's been kicked around in the Walt Disney Company for many, many years. And there were people like myself, many people like myself in the company who had a theatrical background who wanted the company to do it, and we'd always walked away from it as not our main business. But as our company has grown, and as Michael Eisner has looked for new avenues for the company to grow into, this became an obvious opportunity. And based on the response to the film, the idea came up to do Beauty and the Beast, and so we just decided to take the plunge with it.
Now, another problem with Beauty and the Beast, which wouldn't be in an ordinary musical here in New York, is that you have two audiences. You have, presumably, you have a lot of children at the matinees, and you have to lure adults into coming at night, because a lot of people, grown people, wouldn't think that's the musical for me. So how did you deal with that? You knew that from the beginning. So when you got one of those Saturday morning meetings, what happened? What did you decide?
Well, it's not a children's show. It's a Broadway musical. It's a great date musical. It's a love story. It's a great love story. And
there speaks the press representative.
Yeah, right.
I can't believe anything I say.
Enough said.
Now answer the question.
It's something we work about, and we don't want to say this is a children's show, because it's not that. But adult audiences can. I mean, we do shows at 8 o'clock. We have how many shows a week that are not matinees? We have 5 that are not matinees. So. And if you come to the theater on a weeknight, I think audiences love to bring a child with them so they can experience it with a child. But it's not a show that we say is a children's show. Yeah. And the best thing that I've been saying in defense of this being a show just for kids is that if this gets kids involved in the theater, and if they say, I love that. I want to do more of that. What else can I see? Then we've won the battle.
Yeah, I felt that when I saw it. I thought, I agree with you, it's not a children's show, but all of the best theater for children are not specifically, on my head, geared for children, but I saw a lot of kids there, but I thought this is a great way to introduce them to live theater. What a way to turn them on. And I pick up that. What I wanted to ask Jeremy something, too, because I saw, when I saw the show, it is a logistical, it seemed to me like a logistical nightmare. I was an old stage manager, and I thought, my Lord, what a job. And could you tell us a little bit, because I think we're really into these seminars, working in the theater, is tell us a little bit about, one, the transfer, just the nuts and bolts of getting the show from Houston to Broadway. Talk about load-in, lights, all of that stuff is a very, very complex and important aspect of it. Would you address that a little bit, what you have to do and
well, you have to start
how long
out.
it takes?
It took, we closed in Houston January 10th. We started previewing here March 9th. We started in the theater January 3rd, though, in the Palace Theater January 3rd. So we had roughly 2 months and 1 week.
What did you have to do in the theater?
Well, we don't have enough time here to
You don't have 2 or 3 weeks
to
or months.
describe it, but we made a lot of facility modifications in order to house the show. The big challenge with this show was that the show is so large, and we go to so many different scenes. And the show, from the scenic level or the physical production side, had to compete with the other monster musicals that are out there. So the problem with the Palace, it's an inordinately small backstage.
Is it? I'd forgotten that.
Very, very small. Off the top of my head, it's only 28 feet deep. So a great deal of planning went into, we put in additional fly floors. We put a tremendous amount of structural steel in the grid, which is the structure that holds all the flying scenery, in order to support the additional weight we were going to put there. As the scenes go on and off the stage, they immediately go off into the wings and are then flown up into the air so that the next scene can be lowered in and put down into the tracks. The show moves very, very smoothly, and the reason for that is that we are running everything from our lighting systems to our sound systems to our scenic motion control via computers. So as the stage manager gives a cue, he might be enabling 60 or 70 pieces to be moved in one command or 2 commands via
That's
a
incredibly
technician downstairs. So the real thing about moving the show is it's all a matter of logistics. It moved in roughly 28 trailers from Houston to whatever, and then scheduling the process. Because you don't have any space, things have to come in a precision and precise manner where X comes in and you work on X, and you must allocate your time proportionally and see that you
How
can meet the
different is
schedule.
that in working with the New York stagehands here than it would be with the studio or in Houston?
Well, I think there's quite a bit of difference. We had a great crew in Houston, and they were very helpful. But there's no question that the New York technicians are more experienced in this kind of production and just generally what we're doing. I'm sure you would agree with that, Jerry.
Yeah, I mean,
Michael, you would have how many stagehands are, or maybe you both know, how many stagehands are involved?
It's Jerry's turf, plenty.
There's 34 total stagehands on the show. 13 or 14 which work directly for the Disney company, and 20 of what we call local.
Can you give us a comparison between Phantom? I mean, are there any other show that you have, Michael, of the amount of backstage?
Well, Tommy, how many, for instance, on Tommy?
It's more than Tommy, and it's more than Guys and Dolls. But it's not twice as many.
Yeah.
One of the things that's happened in the
One less than Phantom.
There's 1 less than Phantom. I think it's 1 or 2 less than Miss Saigon.
Imagine having something less than phantom and not a phantom. It's a very difficult concept.
Highly theatrical.
We're always being accused of having phantoms, people backstage anyway.
Some of the other fun facts, what, 1,400 lighting instruments? I think are fun facts. 170-some motors.
1,400.
There's actually 100, if you count everything, there's over 100 automated scenic effects. There's 64 Verilights, which is an automated lighting instrument. We have the most, I don't want to use the word complicated, but the most elaborate sound system that the live theater is yet to see. In and of itself is filled with 3 or 4 computers, and we reproduce the sound effects in the show digitally. We pre-mix the orchestra in the basement, and then we send it up to the orchestra mix in the house, so that depending upon how the musicians are feeling one night, we can balance it before it gets out to the audience.
That's spooky. Talking
It
about
is, I mean, yes.
we were with the actors group. One of the actors this spring in our seminar was Murray Abraham, who was in Angels in America taking the Roy Cohn role. And he was saying that the only objection he has to what is happening in the theater, with the wonderful speed with which scenes change and all the rest of it, the degree to which it's all becoming more movieistical than it ever was before, is the degree to which he becomes a prisoner, much more a prisoner of the computers that are setting all those things than he used to be. And he says, as an old-time actor, he feels a certain resentment to the degree to which live theater is less live if he's being made a prisoner of all that. Now, you have the most complicated, I don't want to use the word, the most elaborate example of that that's ever been, and the notion of even altering the quality of tone of an orchestra like that strikes me as absolutely uncanny. And somebody might be skeptical of all this high-tech
technology.
He was. The actors are, in many cases, very skeptical of it. Young actors like Susan Egan and Burke Moses will never know anything else, so they won't be skeptical. But the other people who are accommodating to it are.
I mean, the world is evolving, the theater is evolving, and
I think that's the answer to it.
Yeah. But one of the reasons that our sound system is...
But not something you consent to, perhaps.
One of the reasons the sound system is so elaborate is because the director, along with Alan Menken, wanted to preserve a certain honesty in the music and wanted not to go to pre-recorded tracks which support some of the Broadway shows. So that they wanted it to be very, very live, which necessitated all of a sudden now 31 microphones on every member of the chorus.
Well, also, if you look at the
to keep it live.
Orchestrations of the show, we have a very acoustic orchestra. Yes, we do have synthesizers in the pit, but we have a large string section, which has been pushed aside in many, many other musicals. We have bassoons, we have piccolos, we have the full range in the saxophones, in the clarinets. You know, many musicians are doubling. So the sounds that come out of the pit are very precise and things that we want people to hear. Mm-hmm. We want to hear the little subtleties throughout the evening's performance. So that in of itself is part of the reason in sound. And people are, because of technology, people don't listen, don't pay as close attention anymore, so you have to stimulate them.
Mm-hmm. But the show ends in respect to timing. The timing is almost identical every night, then, I suppose.
Well, no, that's not true, because although it's not a computer where you push one button and you say, okay, I'll be back at 10:30 to... everything is done, it's broken down into segments, and you initiate a cue, and that cue might run 5 or 6 seconds. So if Susan Egan is 1 beat or 2 beats late in starting a song and a light cue is supposed to start, the stage manager is still in control and he calls that cue live. Mm-hmm. So although the control of the environment is technology, the unique thing about the theater, which will never go away, is that it's still in the hands
I was hoping that
of humans.
I thought you would never say that. Never get to it.
Look, I just want to go back to Brendan's comment about Murray Abraham. I mean, I think what has to be differentiated here is the theater and Broadway. The fact is, I think what he's saying is that on Broadway, in some shows, which happen to be, for lots of reasons we can talk about, bigger than most theater over the rest of this country. And mind you, we're talking about 2% of the theater in this country. I mean, in every town of 25,000 people or more, there is live theater going on now, unlike there was 30 years ago. And so if Murray wants to act and not have any scenery, there's 98% of the theaters out there are a choice for him. If he comes here, on the other hand, and indeed wants to work in the Broadway theater, there is with it a kind of expectation, I think, that audiences bring from those towns that have 98% of the theater in this country to Broadway, which is to suggest that it damn well better be different, or I'm not going to pay what I need to come to New York. And it's not only that, I mean, and they want it to be different. You can see wonderful plays and musicals and almost any actor on the stage from Schenectady to Spokane these days. And the fact is, in New York, Broadway is, it seems to be an aberrational part of theater in America. And it is that particular and singular aberration that we find here in New York that makes it either for some worth the money or not worth the money. And coming, you know, and so it seems to me this particular Beauty and the Beast is a new musical for Broadway, and were it one for the Long Wharf Theater or the Guthrie, it might be a very different one, and for the Berkeley Rep in California, it would be a significantly different one than that. If you come here, you want to come to Broadway, you damn well better play by the rules. I mean, the rules basically are that that show on the Berkeley Rep probably won't work here or last very long, and consequently.
No, in this particular case, we were talking about Angels in America, which is an exceptionally complex
absolutely
thing to put on.
Yeah.
And you couldn't get through the evening. It would be 4 o'clock in the morning as it was when the first...
The interesting question about that, I mean, and I realize, you know, is that at the Berkeley Rep, Angels in America had a wonderful run with no scenery whatsoever. And the fact is that the question for Angels in America might be, was the best, most secure place to hold the baby of that wonderful show in a circumstance which is so unbelievably volatile and speculative, and that causes one to have angels coming through roofs as opposed to be referred to as opposed to out of hand. And that's a choice producers make, and then actors choose to do.
And not only in the small towns of America, but we have all this nearly scenery-less theater here in New York and off Broadway and wherever else we happen to be going.
But, you know, I want to...
So he can act wherever he wants.
No question. He
Brendan,
can.
you know, there's been a lot of focus today and in the media on Beauty and the Beast and how much it cost and how elaborate it is and all that. And it was expensive, and it is very elaborate. But I also want to say that we made those decisions that grew out of the script. It grew out of the music. The choices we made in 98% of the cases were to tell the story the best way we knew how, to tell it in a Disney way, and to illustrate the story. It was not... Sometimes I feel like there's so much attention paid to this that people think, well, Disney set out to say, well, gee, whatever that show spent, we want to spend more. No. You know, whatever that show did that was a lot of scenery, we wanted to do more. That was never our intention. And so, while what Michael implied is true, there's more than one way to do Beauty and the Beast. What we have done is to tell the story with our whole team in the best way we knew how.
Yeah, and look, I'm sorry, but just to elaborate, the fact is that so much has been done to this particular Beauty and the Beast that has nothing to do with the physical production. I mean, there's more music that's new in this version than there is that's old from the movie. I mean, texturally, an amazing transformation has taken place in order to move what was on the screen now to the stage. Now, there's very little talk about it, but that's the case. It is indeed a new musical. It is not like Singing in the Rain or Seven Brides for Seven Brothers or Meet Me in St. Louis or even, frankly, more than all of those. The transformation texturally has been massive to transform what was on the screen to the stage. And then it was surrounded by this stuff.
Yeah. You know, we started using the word adapt, and then once we hit Houston, all of a sudden we realized the word was transform, as far as create anew and create something different.
Beauty and the Beast is now at the Palace, and we've gone all through that. Now what are you doing to sell tickets? What happens now?
Yeah. And also, picking up on that, what is, for everybody, what is the difference and the similarity between marketing and advertising? Because, you know...
Well, hopefully they're going to be like
They're
this
together,
very soon.
but they're,
I mean,
they're two separate terms, and I think it's a...
Well, marketing goes out and gets the customer, right? Advertising says come and
well, I think
see
it's a
it.
combination. One thing we have to sort of clear up is that we've never, marketing in the theater is sort of unfortunately a new thing.
Yeah.
We need to be doing more of it, and we're all learning as we go, and that's why people like Marge are so important to us. I mean, I sometimes think that marketing means drive us crazy, you know, like we have to go through that now. It's thing, I know, I love you, but you know, there are days when I go, no, because you know, I can write a press release and I can get the critics to come and I can get a picture in the newspaper and I can whatever, but it's the other stuff that gets people in. I mean, we don't know what actually gets people into a seat, you know, I don't know. And it's us working together to make them have to come.
So that's what...
Well, just to embellish what marketing is, it's all of the techniques that go into selling your particular event, and that includes advertising, promotion, public relations, direct mail, telecommunications, group sales. All of that encompasses marketing.
I think the best thing, you know, advertising, paid advertising, but if you want to go through the list on promotions, I mean, from the appearances and topiaries, and just go
through what that's
sure. For example, promotions really it's the development of a relationship with a third party, and through those companies and their resources, they can use their techniques to advertise whatever particular promotion it is. And for example, the Walt Disney Company feels very strongly about literacy, so we took that as an opportunity to develop a literacy campaign in New York that tied in with Beauty and the Beast, and was able to work with the New York Times, who published a series of articles on the joy of reading. And these appeared every day.
Could I interrupt? How did that start?
It started with meetings with the New York Times, who wanted to work with us.
So who had the idea to say, this would be good for literacy, and let's see where we go with it?
The Walt Disney Company felt it was important to advocate literacy, as we do in the show. Then we had meetings with the New York Times, who wanted to work with us on a particular promotion. And it was a cooperative decision and a mutual decision that this would work best for the New York Times. And they published this series of articles which further promoted Beauty and the Beast and tied in with the show in New York. And we also did similar campaigns with WWOR-TV, who produced a series of public service announcements and tied in with the New Jersey Board of Education. And so both of those strengthened our advocation of literacy. And we worked with Bloomingdale's in the market, who had exclusive shops with the Beauty and the Beast merchandise. They created a series of window displays, and we had cast appearances, and they conducted sweepstakes across the country. So all of this activity provided additional promotional exposure for the show.
That sounds like promotional exposure, what you just said, in public relations and publicity. But what about the actual selling of the ticket? Did you go out to any different groups than the normal theater groups that usually group sales? Did you go to different groups to get blocks of tickets to come to actually buy the tickets that are there?
We have a group sales agency that handles that.
Did you use the normal theater group sales? You didn't go to church groups theater or out of New Jersey or Connecticut and get
we
various...
did a presentation before we went to Houston, where we actually had the actors come in and sing some songs for us, and Don put together this incredible slide presentation showing the costume sketches, which are works of art, and a little bit of the Beast's makeup process. And we did about 20 minutes, some songs, and we did it at the Imperial Theater, and there were 1,500 people there who left and made their reservations for groups. I mean, so it was calculated to do that. We wanted people to get a taste of it long before we came to New York, and the groups then went off and did their thing. So yes, we had.
I also think that there's a picking up, because there's something that Isabel, you touched on, but I think that people should know that one of the, which was picked up on nicely, understanding that the Disney company is promoting literacy, but I think it's picking up on the fact that the Beauty is considered a weirdo because she reads. And I think, I mean, to turn that around, it was a lovely kind of aggressive point of that. And I think, I mean, that all very well that Disney wanted to promote that, but it's really using that as a stepping stone. I mean, the fact that here's the Beauty and is considered the weirdo in the town because she actually reads books.
Again, it naturally grows out of the script.
Exactly.
Yeah. And in Houston, we were at a library. Michael Eisner came in and read to some children at a Houston library. and said, well, I really put the stamp on it. He says, well, of course, it was very deliberate when we created Beauty and the Beast. We wanted to make a Belle of the 90s. We wanted to make a contemporary Belle. We wanted to make, and it was the reading that is what created that character. So sure, to take that as a role model now and push it through. The great thing that I think Disney has to offer the other Broadway producers is the whole role of synergy with our entire company. It's just a key part that you won't find anyplace else, and I think everyone's starting to kind of understand how important it is. We have the ability, and other producers could do the same with other partners, to tie into various parts of the company. For instance, at Rockefeller Center, you'll see topiaries brought up from Walt Disney World to, restate the name of Beauty and the Beast. The record company put out the cast album, and there's, displays, promotions, advertisements around the cast album. The thing that really helped the literacy program come up is Hyperion and Disney Press, who gave 1,500 books to the city of Houston, and then is also doing a book offering to the New York system.
You're doing the same thing here.
Yeah. So it's pulling on those resources, which I think are opening up the whole the Broadway marketing sphere.
What kind of an advance sale do you have now?
Advance sale?
Over $7 million.
You're
Over $7 million right now.
going into how far ahead?
We're on sale through
Labor Day.
September
through
4th?
Labor Day. Yeah.
That's
I
very
think just in general about marketing in the theater, I mean, what you're really talking about is sort of efficient information dissemination. It's not just about selling. I mean, selling tickets is the back end, but basically it's how you get information out there. And what I think is it's what's expected of the theater, without thinking about it, I think, is that what you do is you throw a lot of money at something. The fact is, if indeed the Broadway theater is this combination of art and commerce, necessarily you have to sell tickets in order to keep the art alive or to protect it. The difference between Broadway art as product as opposed to toothpaste is the fact that there's only so many counters you can be on every week, and that's all, so that you only can spend so much money per week on advertising, marketing of any kind, which is why the kind of synergy Don's talking about, or what Chris does, or what Marge does, is not only imaginative, but it's absolutely necessary, because what you can't do is buy the information dissemination network. You can't compete with Budweiser or Crest for the opportunity to convey to people that this thing exists on Broadway, because you only are going to make, no matter how successful you are, so much money as every seat filled can make in 8 performances a week. And that's all. And so there comes a point where justifying we're going to go out and do everything we can becomes very simple, whereas you can put toothpaste on every counter in every store across the country. There's this one counter in this one city between these 2 blocks where all your toothpaste is, and if it's good toothpaste, you only got so much money to spend to sell.
And that's why Broadway is so hazardous for the producer who is only coming in with it as an independent thing and can't, and word of mouth might survive, or cause a play or something to survive off Broadway, but word of mouth for a $6 or $8 million musical.
I've always felt it was an extraordinarily silly thing for anybody to do with their money or their life. Putting mental illness aside for a minute, I mean, it's a really silly thing to do.
Well, this was, in case of Roger Horseshow and Crazy for You, this was the toy of his life.
He always wanted to do that.
That's what he wanted, and suddenly he had $110 million, and with this, he asked his family to vote. Should I make this fantastic gamble? And the children all said, go for it, Pop. And he did, and it worked. And it never does.
Well, in terms of marketing, and we touched it briefly before as far as the family musical and the Broadway musical, I must say we learned a large lesson from Michael's experience with Tommy, where he began to articulate for us very early that there were 2 audiences, that with Tommy there was all of a sudden this new audience of old rock and rollers to bring to Broadway, as well as the theater audience. And that whole winning experience that he had, I think we took right over to Beauty and the Beast, where we realized there was the theater going public, and then there is also the new audience, which is the family audience.
Yeah. And I must say, just informed in the way I think of Beauty and the Beast is in the family of family shows we've done before, Big River, Secret Garden, Into the Woods, which spoke to audiences of all ages. But I mean, I don't think of Beauty and the Beast as a kid show. I think of it as a show for a lot of people, including families. And I think, meaning no disrespect, differently than Cats or even Joseph might be for families, that Beauty and the Beast is in a fine family of shows that speak, that actually have texts and are about something. And we struggled, I think, with those earlier shows, again, in which case much smaller, and I think with a potential constituency much smaller than Beauty and the Beast, to basically draw into the theater not only traditional theater goers but families, and God knows with all of the costs involved in sort of coming with your children
Have you done any
to see anything.
surveys on ages of families of the ticket buyers in the theater for Beauty and the Beast? Can you give us any medium
Surveys?
Not yet.
We haven't done any surveys yet. I mean,
It's probably against the law.
No.
Everything
you
else
can
is.
ask. They don't have to answer.
I know, that's right.
But for instance, with Secret Garden, 25% of our audience in our second year were families. I felt great about that. I mean, that was...
I know this is going to come up in our questions, so I might as well start it now. The ticket price, how did you determine how much the price of the ticket is?
And who did that?
Michael and I did it with the approval, ultimately, of Jeffrey Katzenberg and Michael Eisner.
What is it based on?
It's based on two things. What's things cost in New York? Well, I mean, what the prevailing ticket prices in New York, and based on what our expenses are. Questions come up quite a bit.
Can I stop you for a minute? That based on the prevailing ticket price in New York,
Yes.
why is it always the same, almost, within $5 or so?
I
The
think-
straight play is always almost the same price.
And Michael can answer that better.
And the musical is within $5 the same price. That doesn't happen in a book or in a garment or whatever it might be.
No, but I suppose
the cost
it happens.
of the product is there, and there's a fair amount of return of profit, and then based on that, so it's all different.
Yeah,
Why
I think,
is it?
I think that the answer to your question is probably not the one you want to hear. I mean, the fact is, I think most people wish it could be higher. The fact is, it is that price because no one's got the guts to charge what they ought to for that ticket. That's not to suggest that what you see when you get in is necessarily worth it.
No, I don't want to hear
But
it.
in terms of justifying, but I mean, you'll all decide whether that's the case. But the point is, but I think if anybody sort of on paper put down what you ought to be charging for what this cost and what it costs to run, and what the cost was and what it could be, people I think are scared to death to charge that real number, and so they cling to as best they can desperately a number which seems not as high as they think it ought to be, but God knows it couldn't possibly be lower. And then remember, this is affected not just by your expenses but the size of your theater. So if you've got a large show in a house that's 1,200 seats, that makes it even trickier for you, because the cost of running there may be almost the same as if you were in a 1,600 seat house. So look, I mean, I hate that ticket prices are so high, but I must say, if it was any of us sort of looking at the numbers, I think you would see that it is, as Brendan talks about, I mean, it makes coming here unbelievably silly. I mean, you think about how many shows run, how many recoup, how many make money. I mean, it's a ridiculous thing for anybody to do with the money in the first place. And
I'm just glad from my standpoint that we didn't have a higher ticket price than any show in history, because it would have made my life even...
Yeah. Now, I know that they're talking about Showboat coming in here in the next season at $75 a ticket. And I also know, I think that is very not often alluded to, is apart from the cost of, we talk about 11 million plus, but the cost of advertising has skyrocketed, hasn't it? I mean, that's one of the tough things. I mean, everything's going up, but I mean, beyond the physical production, isn't it true that an ad? What does a full page in the New York Times cost these days?
60? Is it 50?
How much?
a full page?
Yeah.
53.
Yeah. 50,000.
Yeah, 53, 54,000 on Sunday.
Or with color.
Yeah.
Right.
And now with color.
And you know,
But I mean, what you're talking, this is really interesting. It's always been sort of fun to me that the idea of the theater thinking about raising a ticket price $1 is on the front page of the Times. The New York Times raises their line rate, and if it's anywhere, it's buried, and it's usually in a letter you receive somehow to do it, and somehow they just love. I mean, they salivate waiting for us to even thinking about, thinking of what the price of tickets is, and at the same time, I must say, they contribute to that cost.
Every January.
I mean, what needs to be talked about here too, I think, is that in the conversations Bob and I had, and I know in Disney's point of view, accessibility to this show was critical, and the pull constantly was, how can we charge what we need to keep it here, and how can we charge what we need to get the people in who we want to be in while we're here. And so there are an awful lot of tickets in the theater that are not $65. And
how does one know that?
It's in ABC's. It's you call.
The average
and you sort
public
of do
does
it,
not know it. One of the results of these seminars, I constantly hear people say, "Oh, they're so wonderful, and it's so good to hear a theater again." And I then say, "Well, do you go to the theater?" "Oh, I used to, but I can't afford it anymore. I would love to be able to go, but I can't afford it anymore."
Well, we have tickets that are $20. Every performance, as a matter of fact.
No,
So the tickets
How does
range
one
from
know
20
about that?
Well, it's if somebody asks when they call the ticket agent, it's posted at the box office. It's in our.
And they all sell out. I mean, they go.
They
So,
go,
I mean, people know because they're gone.
Well, it's in the advertising.
It is in the advertising.
It clearly is.
But I'm going to look at your ad now.
But it is interesting, I mean, the question you pose, if we were the beef industry, we would be taking ads all over the country talking about there really isn't as much cholesterol as you think there is, or it doesn't do you any harm. And the fact is, we basically can't do that. And I must say, what you may be talking about is the industry needs to perhaps do that to make people understand that the top number is only the number for a certain number of tickets, and there are others. And of course, Disney has worked out a number of both promotions for groups for tickets at no cost if they're empty seats, and for discounts.
Well,
And so
I want to
you
get
have all
into
of
that. We're going to have to stop now and take a break, and it's just so you can catch your breath and gird yourself for more questions for when we come back. So don't go far away. You can stretch, you can move, you can do whatever you want, but come right back again and sit down. Have questions ready. Thank you.
This is CUNY TV, Channel 75.
We're continuing the American Theater Wing seminars on working in the theater, coming to you from the Graduate Center at the City University of New York. This seminar is on the production, and the production is Beauty and the Beast, the exciting new show that's opened at the Palace Theater. Gathered here, along with Brendan Gill and George White, are the people that made the show possible. It's the people that put their money where the show is, and we're going to continue asking them how that money's being spent and what it does for the people that come to see Beauty and the Beast. Brendan, do you want to pick that up?
Well, I was going to say, starting from what Michael had said about what theater tickets ought to be, they ought to be higher even than they are, and very few of us out in the world have any recognition of the fact that this is, if it were a sensible business enterprise, it would have to be much more than that. But of course, part of the reasons, you gave many reasons, and it's really heartbreaking how inarticulate Michael is, but anyway, I never know anybody to speak faster
I'm sorry.
And more usefully than that. But part of the thing, of the difficulty, is not only that the counter is so small, but also there is no predicting the length of time of anything, obviously. The gamble is so tremendous just in terms of temporariness, along with everything else. And that's something that no businessman would dare to go into.
No, the toothpaste doesn't disappear. This is an ephemeral thing that sort of is there for a moment. As some people say, the most valuable thing you have is the poster. The only thing that's left is sort of the poster when it goes like that. So
and
no,
your name on the marquee
you got
months
it.
later in some case.
Yes, indeed.
Well, I wanted to pick up with Robert a little bit, too, because the arrival on the Broadway scene of Disney and the Disney Company is probably the first time in I don't know how many years or generations that there's been a brand new entity. And also it's seemingly, the history has always been people going back from the pre-talkies. They started on Broadway and went to Los Angeles and went into the film. And I think this may be the first of a major film entity coming this other way. And I know that there are plans to renovate. Matter of fact, I think the opening night party was originally going to go into the New Amsterdam. I've got spies everywhere. But this is a very, very exciting, and possibly, and potentially, I've also heard a little bit of scary potential of here is Disney suddenly coming in to Broadway, and there are a lot of, you know, there are certain people in dusty offices between 44th Street and 51st Street saying, oh, my Lord, what's going to happen when Disney hits New York? But I wonder what other plans you have for bringing other things in. I mean, and also, because it is such an ephemeral thing about having, that it's not necessarily a money-making deal.
I didn't hear him say that.
No, I know, exactly. And I realize that Jeffrey Katzenberg used to be an aide to Mayor Lindsay, which a lot of people don't know. So he has that New York background. It's a kind of, I guess in my head, a quixotic idea, perhaps, of Disney, which is making so much money in other areas, to come to Broadway. It's exciting, it's daunting somewhat. And what do you have on the plate? Come on.
Oh,
straight talk.
Well, you brought up about 10 subjects.
Okay.
I don't know where to begin. If I go back to the first thing you brought up about Disney being the first to come, I think there's been many film companies that have done things on Broadway, mostly, at least as far as I know,
isn't it?
mostly as investors.
Yeah.
If there's anything unique about what we're doing here, it is that we decided that this was going to be a Disney, for all the, hopefully a lot of good and very little bad, that it was going to be a Disney production. It was not going to be a case where we were just investors. And that actually was a philosophy taken by Michael Eisner, that he'd done that before in one of his previous companies, I believe at Paramount. But he wanted it to be our show and to be Disney, and we would succeed or we would fail, but it would be Disney. And I think that has been the really unique thing about what we've done in that regard. In terms of whether Disney coming to Broadway is good or bad, well, from our point of view, we'd like everybody to think it's good. You know, some
Let's
people
take it as a given that it's good.
Yeah, I do, but I just thought I'd bring it up. Why not? You know,
But
I realize this is not firing line.
We just want to be part of the community. You know, some people have thought that we wanted to take over, and that's not the case at all. We just want to participate.
What are your future plans? I think that's the important thing.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at another production, which we would hope to open at the New Amsterdam. The possibilities that we're talking about.
When do you think that might be?
Early 1996. We're talking about Aladdin or Little Mermaid or Mary Poppins. Those are the leading candidates, although we're looking at other properties as well.
Will you do any plays that are not based on Disney characters or not based on
yes,
Disney itself?
Probably not to begin with. We still feel we have so much to learn that we think it's important to play from our strength at the moment, and that is to use the material that we're familiar with. But yes, definitely in the future.
You are open to new works
yeah.
and the development of new works.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Does that come out of your theater experience in California, being part of theater out there?
You mean what?
Of wanting to create more theater here in New York?
I think well, yes, but I think it just comes out of the nature of what the Walt Disney Company is. It's a creative, it's a creatively driven company. What we do is create product in all of our areas. If you'll excuse the term product, we create stories, we create films. That's what we're about. That's what the whole company's about, is doing that. And so, of course, it's natural for us to want to do new things as soon as we feel we're ready or we find the right property.
And you'll also be involved in that new international, or whatever they call that, with all the fiber optics and all the rest of it. Will you be also moving in that area? Because everybody in entertainment seems to be thinking about things like that.
Well, I can only quote Michael on that and reiterate what he said in the media, and that our interest is in creating the software, not in getting involved in the hardware. So.
We just talked very briefly in the marketing on your merchandising, the merchandise that you have for sale. Is that a separate pot that goes into all the shirts, the caps, all of that, or is that put into the whole thing? Will that be Beauty and the Beast profits or Beauty and the Beast cost, or is it a separate organization on the merchandise?
Well, it's both. The merchandise is actually being handled by a division of our company called Consumer Products, but when we undertake an enterprise like this, we look at it globally for the benefit to the whole company. So, yes, the benefit, whatever profit there might be, will be credited to Beauty and the Beast in that.
But and I would think from marketing point of view, I assume, or why should I? Can you buy Beauty and the Beast T-shirts at Disney World, Euro Disney, which then, of course, promotes Beauty and the Beast back here when those tourists come to New York, or don't you yet? Or is that going to happen, or is that all part of the marketing plan?
I don't know.
I mean,
it is, right? Yeah, the CD, the cast album rolls out 26, and the T-shirt merchandise, etc., is being shipped out to various Disney locations, including Disney stores across the country.
So, and that, of course, that helps market.
Absolutely. I mean, there's also a great new T-shirt, sweatshirt that's available now in the lobby and I guess in other places, and it says, "My first Broadway show, Beauty and the Beast for children," which is great.
Oh, that is
They're
wonderful.
promoting two things.
We have, for our students, it's hooray, hooray, we went to a Broadway show. That's what our kids are.
Yes, that's right.
Hooray, 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 we went to Beauty and the Beast.
We'll work on the rhyme, but... We also have a thing that we started out at first to be a gimmick for our critics and our VIP press when we first came to New York, is we created a hat that simply said Beast. It was a joke to the people that, say what you will, we have the joke, we're giving you a hat. And it says Beast on it. And now they're on sale everywhere, and so you see children and people wearing Beast hats, and some very strong-willed ladies have been wearing beauty hats. And
I love it. So, that's great.
There's another product which you test me if this is new, but the Ann Hope Ward's costume designs really became a pivotal part in the creation of the show as we redefined the mythology and rewrote the script in that regard. And it was her work that did that. The designs themselves really became wonderful works of art and will be lithographed in limited series, signed by Ann and sold through Disney Art Editions, at galleries throughout the country too.
Well, now that's also that goes back to the show for a moment too. Mrs. Potts, and Lumens, is it? Lumiere. All of those people. Wasn't there a point in the evolution of the show, and wasn't there a lot of discussion about whether or not they should be dressed that way? Would you talk a little bit about that? Because that was kind of an interesting decision, I think, of which way to go with that.
We started like January of '91. By the time we got to April of '91, Michael said, or '92, Michael said, "Tell me how you're going to treat the objects. Just what, the rest of the story. We can combine 54 scenes into, maybe 13. We lose the horse Philippe, for all the practical reasons. But how are we going to treat the objects?" And it was Rob Roth, the director, teamed up with Ann Hope Ward and Matt West, the choreographer. Ann was brought in because she had previously done the two things that we had to do. Number one, recreate a fairy tale in a theatrical term, which she did in Into the Woods, and also pull off an existing artwork, which she did in Sunday in the Park. With that type of background and working with Rob, they abandoned the idea of puppets, they abandoned the idea of projections, they abandoned the holograms, every opportunity that was out for us. And as Ann kind of looked at all of the different ways you could paint the Lumiere or create Lumiere as a costume which an actor could perform in as an actor, they realized that there was a merit to the whole list of it, and that's when the mythology changed in the show, which justifies how the characters are realized on stage.
Because originally they weren't going to be that; they were just characters, right? They weren't going to be dressed like
in the
candelabra.
Yeah, in the film, you only know them as a talking candlestick. At the end of the show, it's kind of a surprise that they are the servants in the castle. Here, the mythology has changed so that you know that they are the servants who are under the spell, who are now gradually changing into these objects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which brings up another thing that someone, maybe Jeremy, you're the person who talked about, which are the special effects again, because they're wonderful ones. You know, and who did that? How was that put together? And you don't have to reveal this if you don't want to, but how, in the end, when he transforms back into the prince,
He won't reveal it.
he won't reveal it. Okay,
Not while I'm sitting here.
me too. Okay. All right. Yes. All right. But anyway.
magic.
It's magic. Okay. Well, there we are.
Disney magic.
Yeah, it's Disney magic. All right. Well, was there a Doug Hemmings type person that created these things for you? A magician?
Yes. We work with two illusionists who work with the director, myself, the scenic designer, into figuring out how we could get the character onto the stage, go to the battle, from the battle scene into the transformation scene, as we call it, and have him transform in front of your eyes, which he actually does. And
Was that the director's idea to have the illusionist work with them? Whose idea was that? Because that's unique in a sense, too.
I think it was a combination of the Disney company, myself, and the director, in that some of the things we tried to accomplish here were different from other Broadway shows, and those resources
It's a very difficult task of directing. You did a wonderful job.
Yeah, yeah. There are wonderful resources available because of Disney, and we tapped into them wherever we could. Also on the pyrotechnics, we used an extremely talented pyrotechnic designer who created all that flash and sparkle, and actually did R&D for over a year in the Enchantress transformation at the beginning of the show, when we transform the prince into the beast. The Enchantress throws a fireball, and in order to develop that fireball, there was a full year of R&D to do that.
Good.
And it's patented as well.
As a good businessman, I know
yes.
that R&D stands for research and development. You can't fool me.
And that fireball came from Nolan Ryan.
You don't often hear that on Broadway.
No, it's true.
No, so...
Well, it's wonderful, and I think certainly the idea of, at the end, however that's done, to have the beast spinning in the air and transforming in front of you, it's just terrific. I mean, one can sort of understand how the other things sort of work, but that one is really just terrific. And for magic buffs,
Despite Michael's statement that the ticket price should be more if we were really putting it all down on paper. At the break, I had a couple of people said, I can't get those $15 and $20 seats. I don't know where they are. And I'd like to know what the percentage is that you have. And let's take this show in particular. What percentage of seats are there in the $20 area? Because that's the biggest thing. I know that the answer is that you're sold out. That if the show is good and they want to see it, and they'll come to see it no matter what the price is. But that's not really the story of Broadway theater, and that's not going to make Broadway theater continue to be what it is if we don't think about getting more people and more theater goers into it, not just those who can afford it for a birthday or for a special occasion. So if there are more seats that are available at an available price, how do we know about it? What percentage of them at each theater? Was that?
I mean, usually
We just
those
heard
seats
about
go
it
first.
at a seminar the other day.
They're known
This
enough
came up again.
about so that they all sell. And they're not just 20 and 65. They're 20 and 30 and 35 and 45 and whatever. So there is this range that goes from here to here, and they vary from show to show. I mean, on Tommy, we have 200 seats in the balcony for $20, and they go before anything goes. I mean, they're just gone.
Rush tickets if
No.
you were there? You don't know. Does anybody? No. Not at all. Would that not be a good idea?
It's very hard to do. I mean, I can't understand that as things get more expensive, really, the New York Times, an actor's contract, whatever, the theater's capacity doesn't expand. The 600-seat theater remains 600 seats from 1950 to 1990, and there are certain consequences from the the fact that, that one doesn't move with the other, or the idea that you'll put it in 3 theaters, as David Merrick tried to do once before the second.
Yeah, it's sort of too bad though that the hit shows. I mean, this is and Brendan alluded to the fact that we are major Wall Street figures here at one point. But it would occur to me that if you had a hot show, a major show, that in a funny way that would allow the ticket prices to drop. Because of but it's supply and demand. I realize the other way, but I mean, but it'd be interesting because you would be able to sell out and could make money. You could drop because you know what I'm saying. Whereas in reality, and then a show that was just marginally making it actually should charge more to make it. It doesn't work that way because you're dealing with a human equation. Yeah. But it's interesting if you're making a lot of money, why the show couldn't.
And there is a way to make ticket prices theoretically less. You could do less. I mean, I think about Guys and Dolls. The fact is we only had to have 16 musicians, and I suppose if there were no minimums, we could only have a synthesizer, and then it might be a show none of us would want to see, but it might cause the ticket to be a little less. But, I mean, that really is a possibility. I mean, the question is, though, if you're the custodian of this good work.
But there are shows where there is only a synthesizer, and the ticket price is not that less.
Well, but I don't know them.
We're ready to go to questions. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
It's fine.
There are so many questions.
I must say, it was nice to have a $42 ticket in Houston where we had a 3,000-seat house. Yeah. You know, it really is the facilities that are there on Broadway, and that.
What was the ticket price in Houston?
$42, and there was a 3,000-seat house that was also sold out 6 weeks. You know, and that was the equation that worked.
Well, isn't Disney going to? Didn't I hear a rumor that Disney was going to use the Metropolitan Opera at one point? No, seriously. Wasn't there some talk about Disney going there?
What parties do you go to?
Oh, there's spies everywhere. John, leave it at that.
I want to thank the panel today. This is an exceptional, very inspiring to hear the backstage process of this. My name is Margot Evan, and my question for the entire panel would be, I'm also an actress, would be how involved you get in the actual process of the creative project. Thank you.
As producers, you mean?
Yeah, Bob, why don't you start?
Well, it depends. All of us have different roles, and all of us are involved to varying degrees. I've been very involved in it. It's not my primary function. Just speaking for myself as the producer, I'm supposed to oversee the business and the creative, but just the creative is not my primary function. I also the primary creative staff, of course, is the director, the choreographer, and so on, and they need to take the lead. In our case, as producer, also for Jeffrey Katzenberg and Michael Eisner, they would come in quite often and critique the show and give us notes, give us their comments. So we've been very involved in every part of the production, and each of these people here are involved to varying degrees.
John, you were going to speak to that maybe.
Well, what was more interesting at speaking to the actress was the role that the actors played in creating these roles, you know, which, as opposed to the producers involved in the creative process. I mean, what Terry Mann did with the Beast, how Susan Egan really did define Belle, you know, how the objects came to life and the actors brought them to life. From the very first reading, when we just sat down and read the script, there were quite a few of those performers that we just went, oh my, that's the answer. My God, that's what Cogsworth is, you know. I mean, we'll put it back on the actors. You know.
It was mentioned that a few changes were made during the production in the Houston run. Did that continue during the New York previews, and what were some of those changes in the production? Yes, it continued during the previews. In Houston, it was an awful lot of how to get from one scene to the other, and compressing those scene changes and elimination of some plot points because what worked in the film just didn't work on stage. And you may remember from the film, Chip is a stowaway, and Chip goes back to. Have you all seen the film? Good. Chip goes back, and Chip helps Belle and Maurice get out of the cellar because it's a whole elaborate scheme, which we had first worked out, and it just didn't further the story, didn't carry it off, and was excised from the show down in Houston.
Probably one of the biggest things too was the way the Beast looked in Houston versus the way he looks now. I mean,
How was that? Tell us.
I have sort of photos from every step along the way, and I can't use half of them now because the Beast was, well, the way Beast was originally designed, he was much furrier and much snarlier and toothier, and he had trouble singing through it and couldn't really see him. And the fact remains, the best thing I think that we've done is let the actors be actors. They're not inside cardboard boxes. They're not wearing foam heads. They are actors. And we stripped away, or they stripped away, the geniuses who did it, stripped away some of the things. So you actually see the man underneath.
It's sort of the evolution of coming out of a cartoon or an animation to that part of the becoming a Broadway show as opposed to a cartoon that we were talking about earlier.
I mean, for the Beast, we actually built an exoskeleton originally that worked just like a beast's spine would work. But it was actually, and we spent substantial monies doing that. To have it move as he moved, to be part of his, it was attached to his shoulders, his arms. It could snarl and ruffle up, and we found that it just didn't enhance the character. It was not. What's
the difference did you find in the response to the New York audience in previews as to a Houston audience? Did you have to do your timing, any timing differently?
Well, we were actually quite concerned about that because we knew the show worked. We got the show to it, so it worked very well in Houston, and because we had never done this in New York, we were quite concerned about what the response might be. And boy, this is a question like, have you stopped beating your wife lately? If nobody in Houston is watching, I will say that the New York audience has they're quicker to understand the jokes. There's a level of sophistication about things that we're doing that they pick up on more quickly. But to our happy surprise, most of the humor, most of the jokes, the story worked in New York as well as it did in Houston.
My name is Pearl Levinson. Can you tell me how long the show would have to run in order to realize a profit over the investment?
Too long.
Thank you, Joe. Too long because the ticket prices are too low. It depends on what kind of business we do. It's kind of an equation that you'd have to figure out. If the show sells out very heavily, about a year, about the same as any other large musical.
We have time for just one more question. What is your question?
Oh, hi. My name is Derica Cody. My question is, who in the panel has a theatrical background, who started in theater, and would you tell us a little bit about it and how you went through changes?
We don't have time for that, but I think you've all raised your hands. Almost every one of you have theater background. Is that what you're talking about?
You mean as opposed to being a lawyer and giving it up and deciding to sort of do something as silly as this? Is anyone a lawyer on this?
This has really been a wonderful panel, and you've been so willing to share your knowledge of it that I'm so grateful to everything that you do here, and I hope that you stay in New York, and I hope that we make you happy in New York, and I hope that Disney becomes a force in New York theater, because we need as much as we can in live theater to be part of New York City. This panel discussion of working in the wings, seminars, and working in the theater has been on production, and it's Disney World who has brought, these are the producers and the staff of Beauty and the Beast, which is an exciting play that has come to New York. This is one of the all-year-round programs of the American Theater Wing. The programs that have a commitment to the community through theater. And we bring live theater to hospitals, nursing homes, and aid centers. We have an Introduction to Broadway program that brings students to their first Broadway show. We have a ticket program in order to have students of the theater able to see Broadway theater. And very shortly I'll be knocking on the doors of these people to beg tickets for our program. Thank you very much. This is coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York in New York City.